Your
Okay,
update.
Larry,
Let us go right to it. Republican Congressman Paul Ryan from Wisconsin. He's the ranking member of the House Budget Committee. Let me just pick up, Paul, first off, on this whole business of the Medicare, 3.9% on capital gains, dividends, capital formation. I refer to this in a low-keyed way as eating our rich. What's your take?
Eating our capital, eating savings and investment, eating job creation. Much more, Larry, is it's not indexed for inflation. So we're creating a huge inflation tax on top of this as well, just like the alternative minimum tax has been eating away at people. So this thing is a massive tax on capital, job formation, and income.
So, Paul, how can they estimate that this is going to generate all these new revenues to cut the deficit regarding Obamacare?
Well, you know how scoring is done around here, Larry. It's done in a static way. So it doesn't take into effect any behavioral changes that investors and people will make based on tax rates. So they just take a look at all that capital formation that's out there and tax it 3.8%, and that gets them the revenue, basically. But look, back to these numbers, Larry. Meet the new CBO score. It's same as the old CBO score. It is a score that ignores $371 billion in savings for doctor fixes, what we call them. It's a score that double counts $522 billion in Medicare cuts. It's a score that double counts $72 billion in Social Security taxes and $50 billion in new premiums from this Class Act. So it is a score that the bill was written to manipulate what CBO gives them. So, look, everybody in Congress knows how to write a bill to manipulate the spreadsheet you get from the CBO. That's what's been done here.
Paul, let me just go and focus in on a couple of these things. First of all, given your own re-estimates, including the gimmicks and the double counting to which you referred,
right,
what do you reckon the real numbers would look like in the next 10 years and the next 20 years? Still
running some numbers in our shop right now, but we think right now that it's about a $460 billion deficit in the first 10 years and about a $1.4 trillion deficit in the second 10 years. We think it's going to be a little worse than that because there are a few more games that they play in the way that they fix this stuff. So it's difficult to get exactly a better number than that, but that's where we think it is right now.
Are you talking, did I hear you mention a moment ago, an increase in the Social Security payroll tax?
That's right, and that's money that is slated for Social Security because benefits go up to claim those tax increases, but they're taking those tax increases and putting it over into the creation of this new entitlement. They're taking premiums from this new long-term care insurance entitlement they're created, the Class Act, and not using it to pay the benefits, but to create this new entitlement. They're taking $522 billion out of Medicare, not to go toward increasing Medicare's solvency, but to create this new entitlement. All of that money is being double counted. CBO testifies to that fact.
And that is on top of the Medicare tax, is it not?
That's right. Oh, yeah, that's all in addition to this Medicare tax.
What would you have if you step back? You know, deficits are all very interesting. But I'm a Milton Friedman follower.
As am I.
And I believe that the real tax burden on the economy is the volume of government spending as a share of GDP. Now, you could balance the budget, but that might not be any good if we're spending 50% of GDP the way they do in Western Europe. Do you have any rough and ready estimates how much the spending numerator would pick up as a share of GDP as a result of this bill?
Well, right now we're at about 24.7%, just doing that off the top of my head. This bill takes us to about 2.4 trillion over the 10-year window when you really look at its true costs. So that's a big number on top of there. I think what this does is it sort of freezes in place, you know, the 25% level, and then we grow up from there. As you probably know, the current projections using CBO's model shows us that within about 20 years, we get to about 35% of GDP. In 30 years, we get to 40% of GDP, and then we just take off like a rocket. So this just accelerates that trend where the government actually doubles in size by the time my 3 kids are my age.
Doubles in size. Doubles in size.
Yeah, the government doubles in size as a share of GDP by the time my 5-, 6-, and 8-year-old are my age. I actually had CBO run the numbers for me on the tax rates required to finance that kind of a government. 10% bracket for low-income payers goes to 25%. Middle-income tax brackets goes to 63%, and the top rate goes to 88% under the CBO scoring.
88% top rate.
You will kill our economy if this is the path we go down. That's before you count this new health care entitlement on top of it. What we're doing is we're creating a new entitlement that says to anybody making less than 100 grand, basically, if you consume more than 2 to 9.8% of health care expenses as a fraction of your income, don't worry, the taxpayer will pay the rest of it. This is the biggest...
All right. Looks like we lost Paul Ryan. I'm sorry, because I was going to ask him another question. All I'll say to you folks is this. I used to be associate director of the Office of Management and Budget under President Reagan. This was back in Reagan's first term. I, for the life of me, do not understand how creating a massive entitlement for another 30, 35 million Americans on top of the existing entitlement, I don't see how that spending could possibly lower the budget deficit in the out years. Did we get Paul back? All right, we got Paul back.
Can you see me?
I was just I don't know if you heard what I said. I just don't understand. I used to be a green eye shade. I was the #3 guy in OMB in Ronald Reagan's first term. I don't see how adding 25, 30, 35 million people to the subsidized entitlement rolls for insurance is going to lower the deficit. I mean, I just don't get that, Paul. I'll never get it. And the only way you get there is by jacking up taxes. But you're not going to get the revenues because the economy will grow much less. You know that. I know that. Let me ask you one last thing. Your friend and mine, Rob Andrews, congressman from New Jersey, he's got a little wee bit of a rebuttal. I want to ask you about this in the Washington Post. He says, Mr. Ryan, that's you, argues that covering the uninsured will kill jobs. But Andrews goes on to say, however, it's voting down the bill that would be a job killer. He says businesses are facing higher costs every day and tougher competition from overseas because American health care is the most expensive in the world. I want to give you a chance to rebut Rob Andrews.
Rob Andrews is one of the smartest guys in Congress on the Democratic side. He's just dead wrong on this. $500 billion in new taxes on income and capital is going to help us create jobs. We can, the shame of this, Larry, is we could get the uninsured insured. We could have health care for people with pre-existing conditions without all these new taxes, without this robbing of Medicare, and without a government takeover of health care. We've offered legislation to do that. The shame of it is the president and his party leaders decided to go with their ideology in one-party rule instead of actually working with us on constructive solutions. And this thing, make no bones about it, this thing is a huge job killer. We could spend the next 2 hours going through all of the provisions that are job killers in this bill, but I think you understand my point.
I certainly do. Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin will deem and pass. That's this phony legislative tactic. Will deem and pass. What are you thinking right now, Paul?
50-50. We know they do not have the votes right now. So they are down. It's within a handful of votes. I heard they gained 3 yesterday but lost 2 today. So this is fluid. I say 50-50.
All right, great stuff. Congressman Paul Ryan of Wisconsin, we appreciate your time very much, as always.